the snapping awake at every shift in the wind outside, only to stare into the blue-black darkness and wait with bated breath for nothing to happen. There was the righteous fury at having been forgotten, as though I, his child and only living kin, was no more memorable than a cracked jug or a harness with a broken strap. This fury would surge up unannounced. Suddenly I'd find myself slamming down buckets only to slosh water over my feet, wringing wet linens like turkey necks, shoveling horse shit like I was digging one grave to hold all of my enemies. And then there was relief. The sole proprietorship over my supper. The break from caring for the one person left on this earth who should have cared for me. We always scraped together just enough to keep us in that little house at the far reaches of the town. I would watch for Pa's return, going about my chores with half an eye on the cabin door, propped open during the warm months to admit the evening. I couldn't tell you what he did when he was gone. He'd just disappear, leaving me to scratch out a few pennies doing other folks' chores, and come back whenever he'd a mind to, half singing a loop of some dirty song he'd learned long ago in the army. He'd roar for cornbread or fire, but when I couldn't produce them, he never got rough, just sad. The cold blue reflection of the empty hearth would pierce through the fog of liquor in some way that the sun or I never could, and for a moment, he would understand that he was a disgrace, supported by a daughter who pitched hay and scrubbed petticoats, and greasy, over-large tears would well up in his eyes. If I didn't move quickly to cheer him up with a song or a joke, he'd set to weeping, which only required more soothing and petting to tame down. Once he started crying, I'd have to smile and lie right into his face for hours on end, until he calmed enough to pull himself up into the loft where he'd snore like a full crew of lumberjacks, or toss and shout when his dreams grew too lifelike. Sometimes, as I lay awake after a long evening spent dabbing at his cheeks, I wished he would have just smacked me instead. It was an ungrateful sentiment, but a beating would have been less humiliating than pretending I didn't mind that I'd never been to school, that all I wore were baggy hand-me-downs, that the pretty town girls wouldn't even talk to me. At 5 days and counting, this was Pa's longest spree yet. Usually his drinking spells only lasted 3-4 days at most. But now, as the sun was easing down to kiss the tops of the pines, he was still nowhere to be seen. The sun dipped an inch lower, and at last I heard a rattling, then a scrape and holler. "Bridget!" His voice came from up the track. My whole back prickled like a porcupine. That strange admixture of fury and relief that, once again, he'd survived his own recklessness. "Where's my little red hen?" came a second shout. I'd swung the kettle out from over the fire and was poking at the contents, wheeling the possum I'd earned chopping firewood, to turn into stew so my stomach could cease its fist-like clenching. "Come on, Henny Penny, I'm stuck," he called out again, tacking a hoarse laugh onto the end. With a stick of firewood, I pushed the kettle of possum back over the flames, wiped my hands on my apron, and went outside. It was that hazy, uncertain time of day when the sky can't decide whether to keep its day clothes on, and the lowest-hung tree branches blur together like a mist. A little way down the track that led past our house, I found my pa perched on the seat of a rattly little buckboard I hadn't seen before. There were 2 skinny mules attached, flicking their ears and staring wall-eyed into the trees. The wagon's rear wheel was stuck on a rock, the work of a moment for anyone remotely capable. "Where'd you get all